Hi guys. So in the last video I had a bunch of issues in regards to cloth not behaving properly, and I got around them by simply instantiating the ship at runtime, and then when it actually gets destroyed I simply reinstantiate it in a different position. I don't reuse the ship anymore, I simply recreate it. It seems to be the only way to get around the issues with cloth. And it works. I also made it possible to view the damage to the ship by creating particle effects on the ship itself. Like here, I lower the ship's health and more fires appear on the ship itself. As I raise or lower the sail health, you can see them become tattered. Now, of course, the ship is not going to be moving this quickly when it's this damaged, but you get the idea, I think. For the actual effects, I was thinking it would be nice to use them as a primary means of showing the damage done to the ship, rather than having some kind of a health bar or anything else. Also, for the wind, you can actually see the dependent is a great way of displaying which way the wind is flowing. So I don't even have to use this gizmo right here for the wind. I can just look at the pennant. Of course, chances are for the game, the camera might not be this close to it, not this close to the ship, I mean, so maybe the pennant will not be visible. We'll see. If it is visible, I definitely would like to avoid having to use UI elements if I can just use the environment itself. As I added these particles here, of smoke particles, I quickly realized that I cannot use the wind zone to make them animate because wind zone is not accessible from the script, as I mentioned in the previous video. I also could not access any of these properties right here from scripting either. None of this seems to be available, which meant that I actually had to modify the position of the particles one at a time in order to make them be affected by the wind the way you see it right now. So it's kind of a hacky way to do it, but it does work. Here you can actually see me iterating for all the particles and adding the wind movement to them. Hacky, but it works. And speaking of the wind actually affects movement now. So if I was to move against the wind, the movement of the ship will be noticeably slower. And if I was to move with the wind, the movement of the ship will be faster. Of course, right now there isn't much wind, so the movement will not be that much faster. But as the wind picks up, the ship will move faster and faster with it. I also made it possible to have different kinds of ships. So some ships will actually move faster when they're moving perpendicular to the wind's direction, while others, like this one, will move faster when they're moving with the wind's direction. I've also made it possible for the ship's front sails to actually extend as the ship moves with the wind. And when I actually release the forward key, the sails go up. Now this is obviously a very hacky way of doing it. All I did is just raise or lower the colliders on the bottom, which essentially makes the cloth go up and down. It's not a proper animation by all means, but it's better than nothing. I've also been experimenting with the way physics works, and I ended up reducing the physics update time from every 20 milliseconds to every 10 milliseconds, which essentially means that there are 100 physics updates per second. What I noticed is this seems to give me very smooth results in terms of frame rate. So all the issues that I had with the jitter and whatnot, they're not noticeable if I use 100 updates per second. I guess it's because it's higher than the number of frames per second. I'm not sure. But all I know is this gives me excellent results and I'm going to stick with it. I did, however, have some issues with it that I had to modify at one point. because apparently the way friction works is slightly different. but I believe it's highly specific to what I was doing, so I'm not gonna get into that. I've also toyed with the idea of having ship be moved by buoyancy effects rather than by using a strange wheel-based approach that I was using, but I could never get it to be quite right, and in the end I just decided to stick with what I got. Like, it does look okayish, but if you look closely you will notice that the masts end up jittering it back and forth essentially. I could minimize that effect by increasing the drag, in particular angular drag, but I could never get it quite right. And after playing with it for about an hour or so, I just ended up sticking with what I know to look good. Now that's not to say that I will not use buoyancy effects, of course I will, but it's probably not going to be for ships. Maybe for things floating in the water it makes sense, like barrels or logs, I don't know, we'll see. Lastly, I've actually experimented with time itself, and in this case you can actually see the ship moving at half the speed because the entire world is slowed down to 50% of what it was before. I figure it might actually be a good idea to have this kind of effect for combat, kind of like a bullet time effect, but for ships. This might give players more of a fighting chance in combat and the ability to react easier to oncoming fire from other ships. But whether I do it or not, we'll see. Fire, by the way, that's probably next thing I should add. The ability to actually fire cannons. Yeah, I'll work on that. For the time being, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.